What impact do you hope this series will have on the dialogue about race in America?
That's a great question. The real conversations about race, every time we have a crisis, people talk about conversations about race. The ultimate conversation about race happens, you might say, silently. And what do I mean by that? I mean, when you go to school, you learn how to be a citizen. But nobody says, today I'm teaching you about how to be a citizen. You learn my country 'tis of thee. You learn I pledge allegiance. You learn American View. You learn George Washington chopped down the cherry tree. You learn he threw a silver dollar across the Potomac River. Some of it might be missed, but all of these stories, from the time you're 6 years old, 5 years old, shape you into being a citizen of the Republic. What's been left out of those stories? Us. And what I think is that real conversations about the history of race in America can only take place when the curriculum is integrated. And the curriculum can only be integrated when the work of great scholars is translated in a way that's accessible and digestible to kids from pre-K through high school and into college. People like me and my producers translating this scholarship into these stories, which we think are accessible, interesting, and compelling. And they show how fundamentally American our people are.
Top contribution.
Music. I mean, we own music. Spirituality. We're deeply spiritual people, deeply religious, traditionally. So music, spirituality. I don't want to say sports. As many people would say sports, I'll say that. But I think our greatest gifts are our spirituality, our music and dance, you know, the arts, the musical arts. And finally, I think that our people are the ultimate Democrats, the ultimate patriots. Every time our people had a chance to go back to Africa, they might have flirted with it, but essentially they all stayed and held America's feet to the fire of its principles. You know, forced the country to live up to its principles. And you have to admire that. Against the greatest odds, and think about all of our ancestors who died fighting for our equal rights. Going back to before the Civil War, in the Civil War, under Jim Crow, and then the Civil Rights Movement. You know, all those innocent people were beaten and killed, all because they wanted to vote. I think one of the most profound lessons is that I learned that racism is a function of economics. And really, this is about the Benjamins. It was about racism was called upon to justify an economic order in which our ancestors were devalued and exploited. Free labor under slavery and cheap labor under sharecropping. And that yielded huge profits for planters. The fact that black people came to Florida before they came to the English colonies, that was a big surprise to me. Because England beat Spain in the contest for the Americas, or North America, all that history was forgotten. The fact that the oldest city in America is St. Augustine, many people know that in Florida. But the fact that there was a free black community, a free black settlement 2 miles north of St. Augustine in Fort Mose, how many of us know that? In 1737. That's bad. And then the fact that the King of Spain, Charles II, in 1693, issued an edict in which he said any slave who fled from the Carolinas and crossed the St. Mary's River into Florida, and pledged fealty to the king, agreed to serve in the militia, and joined the Roman Catholic Church, was free. So So there's a famous rebellion in South Carolina called the Stono Rebellion in 1739. And, you know, these slaves from Angola rose up and killed their masters, and eventually they were killed. But they were heading 300 miles south, trying to get across the St. Mary's River to Florida. Now, how does Negroes know about that? Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
That's amazing. So I think that's one of my favorite stories. You know, the fact that there was an alternative. If Spain had won, our whole history would have been different. You know, but they didn't. They lost.
Why do you think so many of these stories remain untold?
Well, scholars know them, but you know, you might be a scholar who publishes a book and it sells 1,000 copies.
Mm.
We'll reach millions of people with this TV show. And what I am is a translator. You know, we have the work of great scholars, many of them you'll see on the show when I interview them. And I did something really interesting. I took them to the place where the historical event happened. And we walked through it, and I interviewed them there, rather than in their office, which is pretty cool. That you can't do it if you say, okay, this is Black History Month. You have to do it so it's natural. You know what I mean? I think parents having books about Black history that they read to their kids, just like they read Mary Had a Little Lamb and Little Red Riding Hood, and make it a normal part of the experience without calling attention to it. You know, so that kids won't view it as work. But I also think that Sunday schools should be the equivalent of Hebrew schools that Jewish people have. I think Sunday schools should teach about religious beliefs, but they should teach about Phillis Wheatley and Sojourner Truth and Frederick Douglass too. We have to be responsible for teaching our own people's history. Roots 2, Finding Your Roots Season 2. And we're picking the guests. We have Jessica Alba, Ben Affleck, Billie Jean King, and lots of other people. Nas, Ella Cool J, Derek Jeter. And I'm very excited about the series. And we'll do their family trees, and we'll do their DNA, and it'll be just as rewarding, just as exciting as Season 1 was.